live, and by live I mean we're pre-recording this week and edit it down for you guys later. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Beyond the Device. Pardon me as I'm choking on my own intro. Another episode of Beyond the Device. We're joined today with the wonderful Josh Fulton from eSquared. I've worked with Josh for years and years and years, going back to even before I joined 3i Technologies. Very excited to get eSquared and Josh in front of you guys today. It's a great organization when we partner with, and we've done some pretty cool things to solve some business challenges. And while I know who eSquared is, and I know Josh, the people who are listening or watching might not. So, Mr. Fulton, can you give us a little bit about background about eSquared, what the company is, why you started it, and we'll just get things kicked off from there. And please do an intro for yourself as well.
Well, I do like the new look. We got to comment on the look. Last time I saw you, you were clean shaven.
That's right, baby's bottom.
Polo,
yep.
All buttoned up.
I like the jacket with a pocket
COVID,
square. Yeah.
Yeah, the COVID look has done well for you.
Thank you. I got into swashbuckling. That's why I got bored over COVID.
So Josh Fulton, eSquared. We've been around about 20, 21 years in eSquared. I started the business back in about 2000. And in the early days, I was acting as a technology consultant in various formats. We started the business really with the initial idea of helping customers kind of navigate very complicated solutions and realize that they needed something that actually could help them manage it after we put it in place. We could solve a problem, fix a problem, implement a problem, but then they really had the hardest time of managing the solution long term. So our business model converted from a consulting firm into a management firm about 10, 15 years ago. And since then, we focus in around about 5 vertical markets. Our vertical market expertise are in the transportation space, construction space, field service space, healthcare space. And what we typically do are manage mobile application solutions. So we typically take their solution, we marry it up with a piece of hardware, help them roll them out, help them deploy them. We have a 24/7 help desk that kind of supports the whole model behind the scenes. In doing that, we get into some complex things like trying to figure out the MDM tools or trying to figure out the applications they need, what kind of mounts they may need, what kind of hardware they need. All those things come into play to make it all easy for them because there's about 5 or 6 major elements that they have to buy, and it becomes complicated pretty quickly, as you probably know from your previous background.
Yes, yeah, it does. It gets complicated very quickly. One of the unique things, and I just learned this about you very recently, and I wanted to talk about it. Over 20 years ago, before you got into this business and before you became the person that you are today, you were a cattle rancher. Is that correct?
Right. That's right.
How does one go from cattle ranching to MVNO? Sorry to step over you. How do you go from that to what you're doing today? That's a pretty unique background.
Yeah, from cattle rancher to tech mogul. There's a lot of similarities. So the similarities are hard work. When you grow up on a farm or a ranch, in my case, there's no time off, right? So when you start a business, one of the things that people don't really realize, I think, is that there's really no downtime. You're constantly working, and there was really no difference between owning a business and a ranch from that perspective. The pieces that are similar in that way were just about work and ethics and character and those kind of things. There's a lot of similarities from that perspective. The ranching industry, if I was to have continued on that path, I would have figured out how to automate some part of it, which is not that easy, as you know. But as far as connecting the dots, it probably ends pretty quickly after the technology today. They did move into RFIDs and ear tags nowadays.
Really?
Yeah, so they have RFIDs nowadays. The cows can now run through RFID readers, which is pretty impressive. And
that's pretty
cool. Their whole binary research background. But yeah, there's that. And then we actually have agriculture clients. If you think of like we have a Trimble division that is in the ag business that handles like tractors, and they have tablets mounted in the tractors, and they run off GPS. And so there's some crossover for some of our business lines. But as a whole, it kind of ends at that point. My dad, who's still on the farm and the ranch, comes out and visits. He still doesn't quite understand what I do. But as a whole, it is a difference. And one of the key things that I can always say to people that I know how to do that other people don't know how to do is I know how to drive a bulldozer and a tractor.
There you go.
Do either one.
There you go. My to that so my grandmother, she passed many years ago, but she also, when I was getting very heavily into like the technologist world, she did not understand what I did, nor did she understand how to explain it. And she told people I worked for the internet, and I thought that was the most adorable thing in the world. It's like very sweet of her. Thank you, Gagi. Rest in peace. But she is, yeah, I get it. The generations that don't necessarily understand what we're doing. But welcome back to, I guess, welcome to the tech world and out of the cattle rancher world. Speaking of hard work and the challenges that exist in both of those, one of the ways that we work with you guys on a regular basis is mounting solutions to make an awkward transition between cattle ranching and mounting solutions in a vehicle. But both a lot very complex in their own right, and I think it speaks volume to how successful and valuable you guys are on the channel in being able to figure out what is the right mounting solution, because they're wickedly complex when you look at all the parts. I mean, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of parts to make up something that you see as a final product, and that's something you guys do really well. So I wanted to just at least give you guys a little bit of props on that and maybe explore that topic and maybe get into some of the background. Construction and transportation, I'm assuming, is where this was born from.
Yeah, so the majority of that is in the transportation space. Construction space is definitely a component of it. The transportation space drove a lot of our interactions, and the partner that we're referring to is RAM, which we love, by the way. RAM has been in this industry for a long, long time, has built some amazing products, and but has an item list, as you know, probably north of maybe 500, 1,000 SKUs.
It's many.
And when you start combining the elements of both vehicle, the type of device you're putting it in, the durability that you need it to be. Does it need to go in and out of a cab? Do you need a hand strap on the back of it? Does it need to be ruggedized on top of it? It gets pretty complicated. And if you don't have someone that's kind of a subject matter expert about best practices of what works for that vehicle and that device and your solution, you can get put down the wrong path pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. And what we find is that sometimes we get introduced to customers who've had bad experiences because maybe they try to research it on their own, or they try to buy and install on their own, and it's kind of trial by fire, and then sometimes that doesn't work very well. But what we can tell you from our expertise is based on a couple of very basic bullet points. What kind of trucks are you running? What kind of applications are they doing? Are they going in and out of the cab? What kind of durability do you need around the device to make sure it's ruggedized outside the device, outside the cab? We can make that experience a whole lot easier. And I'll get the last component. A lot of them get lost in the area of assembly. When you go and buy the mount, which if you figure out those SKUs, if you got the right one, it gets complicated at putting it on the device and then mounting in the vehicle because of the fact that you'll receive maybe 4 or 5 parts per vehicle. We make it simple. We put it in one box per vehicle. We kind of pre-assemble a lot of the devices to be a little simplified. We all go ahead and put if it's in a tablet or a handheld device, we put those devices together. So it makes the installer experience cheaper, easier, more efficient. And it's less confusion for the installer that ask 1,000 questions about what piece goes where. So it makes that process a whole lot easier. So that integration sometimes is overlooked. People can do it. You can do it on your own. It's just that you'd have to have some experience with what works best for those trucks and vehicles in your solution and for your environment. But that's probably where they fall apart sometimes, just not being able to put it all together and make it easy for an assembly alignment process.
Yeah, I think people, well, it's actually funny. So speaking about beyond the device, hence the name of the podcast, the reason we call it that is to get people to think beyond the device and how something's going to be used in the field. And I've talked about this on a lot of other episodes, which is a budget's put together for a thing, a tablet, a handheld phone, whatever. But it's not really, nobody gets through the workflow of how it's going to be protected, to your point, how it's going to be mounted, how do you secure it? Not physical security, but actual, digital security. Like, how do you manage the device? And we're going to talk about MDMs later as well. But it's like, how do you keep it connected to some type of a signal, to data? Because if you have a really great mounting solution or a solution of some kind, whether it's in a warehouse or a truck or wherever it is, if it doesn't connect to data, it's just a pretty sweet paperweight. And we talk about that a lot as well. And I think a lot of people spend, and it's not because anyone doesn't know what they're doing or they're stupid. It's just like you got a budget and you got to execute, and everybody starts with the device first because that's what everything runs off of. I mean, I'm running this interview off of the camera on my phone. I just have this mounted on my desk, and that's what I'm using. So it's like everything runs off of a device of some kind. How do you like how do you make the workflow better so it's not so jarring? And I guess that's again why we call this episode, why we call this podcast Beyond the Device, is to get people to really focus on beyond just the device. And I think to your point about the complexities of where this goes, lean on another organization that's done this thousands upon thousands of times, tens of thousands of times, probably at least, that have, seen the mistakes that have been made and can learn from them and have already learned from them. So that way you don't have to do it. It's like if you ever try to like do any remodeling in your home, where you're like, I'm just going to fix something. I don't need to hire anybody. And you start doing it and you're like, holy, this is not as easy as I thought it was going to be. Installing a door is difficult. It's like you get to the framing, you start cutting things out, you find all kinds of, it's kind of one of those things. So definitely lean on people that have the expertise. It'll save you a lot of time and headache and probably a ton of cost overall.
We do about 12,000 to maybe 15,000 devices assembly and ship per month.
Wow. Yeah, so hundreds of thousands by that call for sure every year. Yeah.
We run into things that you may not run into, right? The complexities and problems and trials and errors that we kind of find out in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. So it'd be tough to have the level of experience unless you're doing that all the time. Right. I think there is something to that. I think that most people say, when should I involve you in trying to figure that out? You typically are going to define what software partner you're going to buy from first, because it sets the requirements on the device, then it sets the requirements of how you're going to use the device. So after you figure out what software you're going to be running on it, which really dictates what device you're going to be buying, then that's when you should engage some partner like us. Then we can help you with that process and make it a whole lot easier. Oftentimes we're integrated with the software providers. We're in most cases in the vertical markets that I described earlier, we're probably in 70 to 80% of those software providers today. We're integrated with their sales teams and they kind of bring us into that sales cycle. But if you're watching this and you're an end user trying to figure this out on your own, you can definitely get a hold of us on LinkedIn. We can definitely assist you with trying to find those solutions if you're trying to do it on your own. Or if you're just researching and trying to find problems on the internet and you found this YouTube channel after the fact, and you're saying, I don't know how to fix my tablet mount issue, then we can always help with that too. Even if you already have your device, we can assist in any fast you kind of come up to, because it becomes complicated and we've seen people lose jobs over it, and it doesn't have to be that hard. It just makes it a little easier on us.
Yeah, the buying experience does not have to be tragic, right? It doesn't have to be something overcomplicated. And again, it's like, lean on your expertise of the people that have been doing this for a very long time. And we'll put some just in the description below on the YouTube channel. We'll put some links in there to your LinkedIn and to your company's LinkedIn and some of our stuff as well. So you'll definitely have multiple mechanisms of reaching out to us, regardless if you're listening to this on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or if you're doing this on YouTube, we'll give you the information so you can reach out and contact people. And to your point, if you have done something errantly, you need to learn how to fix it, or you don't know what to do to fix it, also a great resource for you guys. You mentioned the software piece of that, and I wanted to come back to it. You guys do have a pretty significant footprint from a partnership perspective. I think it's over 40-ish, or maybe 50. I can't remember how many software providers you work with, but the SaaS model is very important to those individuals, or I should say those individual organizations. And you guys have been able to pair that with a device of some kind, a solution of some kind, to make them even more valuable. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because I think, again, it highlights your expertise.
Yeah, so there's two audiences we typically have. We have a SaaS audience, which is a software as a service. So think of the software and sales organizations that are out there trying to sell a model that goes on a mobile device, a tablet, or some kind of barcode scanner. So those application providers are our customers in that perspective. Then there's also the end user that use the complete solution. The SaaS solution audience typically is a sales organization that is selling their products, but they also know to be successful at selling software, they have to have somebody like us to do the integration. And so they typically bring us inside the ending of the first phase of I like your software, I want to roll this out, tell me about what the next steps look like. And they have no plan on how to figure out what hardware they need, what mounts they need, what MDM, what wireless carrier they want. Do they have their own application themselves that they need to deploy and they need to support it? That's where we come to play. We fill all of those gaps for that software salesperson. And the same thing for the end user. The end user comes to us and says, look, I don't want to rely on the software provider or the AT&T or the Verizon. I want to be able to have my own outsourcing model for a help desk and a warehouse model That's typically what our customers look like, those two different facets. And we're solving a similar problem on both of them. Really, we're kind of an outsourcing model in most cases, where we're allowed to come in and solve the problems that they want to get involved in, which really is hardware, help desk, warehousing, setting up and deploying and recycling. That makes it all kind of possible for them. They really just wanted to focus on their core mission, which is really either the software application for the field service or transportation industry.
Yeah, I think the outsourcing model is something to talk about. I mean, you guys do a really good job with this because of the complexities around getting some of these things either in vehicle, in field, just in general in use. I mean, something as simple as I should say simple in theory, which is providing power to a mobile device that's in a vehicle, but actually installing it and getting the wires to the battery or into the dash and some of that can be also very complex. And so even though it seems very simplistic in its concept, bringing it to fruition is a very different topic. So I think you guys play a pretty crucial part in being able to figure out the complexities of that outsourcing model to aggregate this into a solution that's, again, cost savings, but also the time savings behind it. It's incredibly, incredibly valuable.
Yeah, the idea of what it would take just to run a help desk. If you think of it as like some people we've been brought into where they say, well, we're thinking of just going to use our own help desk. And I ask them how big their help desk team is, and they'll typically say, oh, we got 4 or 5 people. Well, so then you immediately know they're not going to be able to staff it on a 24/7 basis.
I was about to say, like, so they work 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
No, of course not.
You know that they're already going to be challenged with that. So how are they going to support it on the weekends, evenings? They'll try to do an on-call model. Typically, you're finding you're already like, this is not going to work. If this size of organization, they're going to have challenges. Mm-hmm. So we tried that ourselves, right? We were running business support mechanisms for years, trying to do a staffing model where we weren't really doing a full-time 24-hour basis. And about 8-10 years ago, we decided we're going to have a full-time audience where we have customers and people in seats actually answering calls at 2 a.m. on Friday, at 10 o'clock to be able to answer calls. Ultimately, it made a transition to our business because we knew no one was doing it well in that space. Yeah. So it made it a whole lot easier for them to get a support that was consistent that's wrapped around their solution. And they wasn't driving their cost up, right? So a lot of times if they were going to go support it properly, they need about 7 to 10 people to be able to support a 24/7 basis and have the ability for call outs and people going, in and out of the support mechanism. But as a whole, that is probably one of the overlooked elements of how are they going to support it after the fact. And that really don't have a plan sometimes.
Yeah, the support mechanism, the post-sale support is so crucial, and it gets left out. And maybe that should be the name of our next podcast. The beyond the device to get to the first part, and then support the device. That'll be the next podcast we do. But in all seriousness, a lot of times it is an afterthought. And again, this is just coming from. It's not that anyone's bad at their job. It's just that you get a budget to deploy something, and you start to have an idea of how to do it, and you just kind of. Just by human nature, you forget all of the things, especially if you've done it before. That's the other thing too. If you've never done this, you don't realize all of the points of failure that exist. And unless you have somebody that's been doing this, which is why I keep coming back to you guys as the experts. If you've not done this for years, and 20, would you say 20 years, 21 years? How many years?
21 years, yeah.
21 years, man. It's a long time. It's many experiences, especially if you're doing 10,000 a month.
Yeah, hence the way I look. I mean, I was a much younger looking pup at that time.
But yeah, I think again, it's like knowing how to deploy something, knowing how to support it once it's already in the field is so incredibly crucial. Actually, one of the stories our CEO talks about. His wife works at Kellogg, and he ran into a guy at a hotel wearing a Kellogg shirt, and it's just like, oh, hey, my wife works at Kellogg. Like, what do you do for Kellogg's? And he was a field guy, field support, and he would go to the stores and make sure everything was working properly, or making sure everything was displayed properly. I can't speak suddenly. Properly, and they gave him a Surface Pro to do it with, and they kind of stripped out all the other stuff that he'd been using in the past, and it's like. You can use your Surface Pro because we connected it to LTE, so you can use it for maps, and you can use it in the field, and it's got a camera on it, so you don't need your secondary device anymore. And they kind of jammed all of this into one device. The problem was it wasn't mounted in a vehicle. There was no power. So at some point during the day, the device would, and this is many, many years ago, by the way. So this has long been solved. But I think it goes to the highlight, and the reason I bring it up, and there's something, it's Kellogg. Every company's done this at some point, where you deploy something and you just don't think of all of the points of failure, and it's so incredibly crucial. And the reason I harp on this so much, especially with you on the podcast, is that we have partners that have done this a gazillion times, and there's only so much we can do from a distribution perspective where we understand the points of failure, but actually getting into on-site installs and vehicle installs and where this is in the field and understanding this world, working with a partner like you is incredibly, incredibly important. I wanted to transition again to the MDM piece of the conversation as well, because there's, with deploying, a mobility solution in field, that's one piece of this, but also being able to secure it, not physically, but the actual security of it, and then also the management of the devices. And a lot of times it's very complex. It's everything from, I want a golden image, it's like custom binary. People go really off the deep end with that, to avoid something like an MDM, where really all they need to do is just limit Bluetooth activity or limit Wi-Fi in certain places, and contextual MDM pops up versus some crazy expense like that. So can you talk a little bit about the MDM portion of deployments, because it's also it's yet another angle of complexity and another point of failure that I think people don't necessarily do well, because there's so many choices out there of what you could do and where you could go.
Second to the comment I typically hear, which is behind the comment of, where can I get a free tablet? Which is typically what they start off at. Can I get a free tablet from Verizon or AT&T? Who's giving the deal of the week? That's common comments that we try to, when they hear. After we get past where can they get the cheapest tablet or the cheapest solution from a hardware perspective, the second one that they may or may not realize they need to figure out is MDM. MDM ends up controlling the device in a way that either makes their life a whole lot easier or a whole lot harder. And there are probably no less than 20 different versions of it around the world that can do it. There are some that do it in different ways. Android is a little different from Apple. They all have a little different flavor that's out there. There are manufacturers that make MDM. As you know, Samsung has a Knox version that's out there. There's a bunch of them in the Android space, which is the majority of what we see in the field space is Android type of devices. In the medical space, we see a lot more of the iOS, and those are kind of the separations of those different markets. But if in the spirit of trying to talk through the field service and transportation side, most people try either, if they're very large, they know what MDM they want, they know what MDM does for them, and they may already have their own MDM, but they still need someone to help set it up, make changes, set a golden image like you're describing, and help actually get those images onto devices and roll them out. We can do that. We roll them out with their existing MDM, or we can help them through the process of determining getting an MDM. Which is a pretty large undertaking, especially for somebody that's not that technical. It feels overwhelming because it uses a tremendous amount of acronyms that feel like it's a software piece that is not user-friendly. But we can make that very user-friendly and very easy to navigate for them. We've got 4 or 5 versions that we kind of do best in class that we know we like in that space. We typically find one that is the simplest and adds the most value. We don't try to go with the most bells and whistles, the ones that's most expensive. We try to find one that actually adds the most value. And the value to us is one that's easy to manage, one that allows it also easy to manage, plus being able to remote into the device to be able to help the user experience. So if I'm in the field and I'm having a challenge with an application, someone can remote into it and show me while they're on the phone, this is actually where you click, this is what you do, makes their life a whole lot easier. And then the third one really is just pushing the new applications down to the device. With an MDM, you can make sure they actually have the latest version. Most software companies push out once a week, sometimes 2 times a week, new applications to fix bugs constantly. And if you rely on the end users to just accept the newest update, which, by the way, most people don't do. Most people don't accept it. I bet if I look in your phone right now, you haven't accepted all the updates lately.
I have, and I will. I also have been scared to death over not accepting the updates because of some of the partners. Shout out to Zimperium that we work with that around mobile threat. Because if you don't update your software, there's another 0-day exploit in iOS going on right now. As of what is this, Wednesday, September 15th at 3:47 in the afternoon. Because in case you're watching this like in a year from now, I don't want anyone freaking out. But there's all kinds of exploits that pop up all the time in everybody's software stack somewhere, somehow. So I am like, super vigilant about making sure my stuff is updated, and you should too. And also stay the hell off of third-party applications and third-party app stores. Like, they're not good. And they will destroy your device. Sorry to go off on that rant, but what were you sorry? What were you saying? Update your device. Absolutely.
Well, you just saw yesterday, just to your point, like yesterday, Apple had a bug released that made all national news that all they had to do was text message to the device. And they could turn on the microphone and turn on web browsing and do screen captures. And so it happens. It's rare. Those are typically, large entities, nation state kind of scenarios. But the most common real problems are not those problems. It's really just literally the user experience that the application broke. They have a fix for it, but you haven't deployed it and the users haven't accepted it. So if you allow users to accept it, it really doesn't happen very consistently at the best. And most likely, if you look at a large group of people that have 100 of these devices, 50% of them have updated the devices on average. And you'll find that in the cases of what that may mean, it's probably not as much of a security issue as it is that user experience. Because if you're trying to train employees in a field service or transportation space, what they're typically, one of the challenges is trying to retain employees. If that application is not running properly, it creates a tremendous amount of frustration there. So MDM solved that. You can push it out, you can guarantee it. They don't have to touch it, they don't have to accept it. It automatically goes into the device, makes it a lot easier to do those kind of things, keep it up to date and working properly. And securing it, to your point. You can lock it down so no one can actually browse the device. The end user can't go out and download applications. You can stop all those things from happening, which is really what you're trying to do, is stop the problem before it happens.
Yeah, Security World's crazy one. That's like a 5-hour. I'm still waiting for like the 5-hour podcast that we're going to do with all of our security partners. I want to bring in do one individual episode and then bring him in like an MCU. It's the Avengers fighting against like the cybersecurity stuff in the world. It's pretty wild, and some of it feels like it's almost unavoidable. But there are preventable ways to have things running on your device in real time to prevent those things from happening. So to your point with the iOS thing, which is so crazy, and it's actually, I think this is how they hacked Bezos's phone too, or Bezos, however you pronounce his last name. I think I always say
they did his through a video. It was the video clip.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So they sent. I think it was with WhatsApp, but there was an exploit within the software that elevated permissions, and you didn't even have to. This is the crazy part. You didn't even have to touch it. Just getting the message compromised your device. You didn't even have to hey, click here for this, 10% off of whatever your next Costco run or whatever, like the crap I get on my phone on a daily basis. You overpaid it at Sam's Club, and I'm not even a member, whatever. But some people, you tap a button and then your phone gets smoked. This is how people are getting so creative now. They're such an expert at this world. You just get it. And it's like, then your phone's done. So make sure you update your devices, not to scare the crap out of everybody at the very end of the episode.
Or just don't make enemies of the Saudi princes that are there with.
That too. Do not make enemies of the Saudi prince. I don't know the man. I'm sure he's something. I will never say anything bad about him. I'd like to not get murdered. Anyway, I'll leave that there. Any final comments or closeouts here before we get out of everybody's hair?
No, I think that the biggest thing I could tell you is that, this complicated elements of buying mobile devices, mounts, and configuring them and setting them up doesn't have to be complicated. Yeah. You're probably most commonly going to wireless carriers or larger integrator partners buying from Ingram or CDW and trying those paths, or even at Amazon. But if you can find a subject matter expert, and I'm not saying we're the only one in the space, but if you can find a subject matter expert that has tried and true experiences in the vertical market that you're going into, they can definitely add a tremendous amount of value to it and do it at the same cost that you're buying it at anyways, without having all the headaches. So I would say, look for those partners, try to find them, especially ones that have been tried and true, been around for a long time. obviously I'm one of those people I'd like for you to call. So if you can, look us up on LinkedIn, reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you guys as soon as we can. Thanks, Reid, again for the time.
Absolutely. And there's the LinkedIn will be in the description as well. We'll put that in the YouTube description. Thank you, Josh Fulton from eSquared, hanging out with us today on another episode of Beyond the Device, talking to us about how eSquared can help your business and its mobile solutions. To learn more, please email us at sales@3itech.com. That's sales, the number 3, EYETECH.com. If you like the episode, please click like and subscribe. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Check us out for another episode of Beyond the Device. We'll see you guys on the internet. Cheers.